I'm Jack Maddox, a fourth-year finance major at the University of Cincinnati, and this is my final project for my Finance 4021 course, Derivatives. And I'm going to focus on Warren Buffett's billion-dollar warrant bet, and this is basically how a derivative structure stabilized Wall Street when it needed it most. So today I'm going to break down one of the most fascinating real-world uses of derivatives in modern financial history. And what is so crazy is this still has implications to this day, and it is so recent in the scope of financial history. And it's Warren Buffett's crisis-era investment in Goldman Sachs. Now, this wasn't just some stock purchase. Buffett engineered a deal where he used preferred shares and embedded long-dated call options, warrants, that gave him huge upside potential with surprisingly minimal downside. This one singular transaction earned Berkshire Hathaway billions of dollars and helped restore complete confidence in the market during the 2008 financial crisis, even helping unfreeze certain credit markets. It serves as a perfect example of how derivatives can be used strategically to design asymmetric payoffs. Now, let's walk through what happened, how the structure worked, and why it was so effective. First and foremost, we need to go over some background. What is going on and what is this deal structure? So to understand this deal, we need to go back to the middle of the 2008 financial crisis. And if you don't know, this is something that was basically swept up from a housing crisis issue. People weren't paying mortgages. You had swaps going all through the market, and everything just burst. So liquidity had completely dried up. Major banks were failing or being bailed out. They're falling by the wayside. You have places like the Lehman Brothers that went under. Investors are terrified, and companies like Goldman Sachs are desperately trying to stay solvent and maintain market confidence. Now, to do this, they needed two things extremely fast. They needed it now. They needed capital, but they also needed a signal to the market that they were going to survive. They needed confidence from the market that they were going to make it. Buffett provided both of these for them. Now, first and foremost, he invested $5 billion into Goldman. And like we said, it's not in the form of common shares. Instead, what he did is he bought preferred shares, which would pay a massive 10% dividend. That is $500 million per year in guaranteed cash off of that. And then if that wasn't enough, on top of it, he negotiated warrants, which are essentially long-dated call options, which give him the right, but not the obligation, to buy 43.5 million shares of Goldman at a fixed strike price of $115 over a 5-year term. That's a long time to see if that stock will go up, especially if you're pumping $5 billion into them. Now, from Goldman's perspective, this had to be worth it because Buffett was their last resort liquidity lender. And his involvement alone signaled to the market that Goldman was going to be stable and was stable. And from Buffett's perspective, the structure offered safety from the preferred dividends getting $500 million a year and the possibility of an insane, explosive upside from those warrants. Now, this is where derivative mechanics really come into play. The key derivative here is the warrant, which functions like a long-term call option. It gives the holder, which in this case is Warren Buffett, the right but not the obligation to purchase those Goldman shares at the strike price of $115. Now, the reason the structure was brilliant is because it created a highly asymmetric payoff. If Goldman stock recovered, the warrants would become extremely valuable to Buffett, which would allow him to buy shares at an incredible discount and enjoy that enormous upside to make a generous profit. But if the bank didn't recover, Buffett still bought all those preferred shares, which had that 10% dividend. So he's getting $500 million a year, and they also sit above equity in the capital structure. He's getting $500 million a year. If the warrants don't work out, he's getting money every year. And the environment also amplified the value of his warrants. In 2008, volatility was at an incredible high, and in option pricing, higher volatility increases the value of call options because there's a greater chance the underlying stock will swing well above the strike price. So Buffett was not just buying equity at this time. He was buying volatility, timing, and leverage. And this is at a moment when markets were distressed and pricing power shifted to whoever had liquidity, which he just gave to Goldman. So they have an incredible chance to bounce back, and that stock is more than likely going to shoot up, which it did. This deal is a great example of using derivatives strategically to shape risk and return, rather than just speculatively throwing your money into the market and hoping that all works out. Now, let's talk about why Goldman agreed to this structure and how much Buffett actually profited from his deal. Now, Goldman Sachs, their acceptance is a given, as I said. They absolutely needed it because survival was the priority. They were worried about going under at this point in time. And they gained this immediate liquidity. Now they have $5 billion. They are stable. And Buffett's name alone provided their credibility, which was that second part that I talked about them needed, which reduced panic around the company and stabilized them thereafter. As you can see here, where's warrant prices and where's investment is, and the bounce back, the recovery of Goldman shooting back up. And also, this is a great part for Goldman because they are preferred shares. They did not dilute voting power, and any further dilution from the warrants was seen as an acceptable trade-off for immediate liquidity and confidence. Those are things they needed now, so they identified the risk and found it as a necessary evil. Now, for Buffett's payoff, first and foremost, as we've said multiple times, with those preferred shares where you had 5 billion of them and a 10% dividend, he was earning $500 million per year in dividends on those preferred shares. And when Goldman stabilized and wanted to clean up their balance sheet, they didn't want this hanging over their head. They redeemed the preferred shares and paid Buffett an additional premium. And also, when the warrants were restructured and eventually exercised, Buffett made roughly $2 billion directly just from that derivative portion of the deal, if not more. I see differences when I was doing research on what the exact number was. But put together, I mean, he's walking away with around $3.5 billion in profit from a $5 billion investment, which is an enormous return. I mean, considering the fact of crisis risk, and it was far superior to what he would have earned buying common shares outright without having that dividend, that $500 million per year, or those warrants. I mean, you can only think about how different the payoff would have been if those were the terms. And this is just the power of structuring. You know, same company, same moment in time, but it would have been a completely different risk-return outcome from the preferreds with the warrant versus just buying common stock directly. Now, finally, we're going to go over the market impact, and this is just beyond his own profit. This deal played an important role in the broader financial markets, again, further than even Goldman Sachs. I mean, his investment was this psychological anchor. If Warren Buffett was willing to commit billions of his dollars to Goldman Sachs during an absolute peak of uncertainty, that sent a massive signal to other investors that the bank, and by extension the financial system, still had stability. Warren Buffett has a giant aura around the financial market world where he makes decisions, people follow him, people follow his investments. They find those companies to be stable because Warren Buffett's into them. It must be good, it must be safe, he must believe in it, so I should too. This helped attract additional capital while also reducing panic and contributed to the process of reopening some of those frozen credit markets. I mean, from a derivatives perspective and takeaways, this is a textbook case study. It demonstrates how warrants function as these long-dated call options, and derivatives can at the same time limit your downside while also amplifying your upside. And how high volatility can and will actually benefit those option holders. Most importantly, it shows how derivatives can be used in smart, strategic, value-creating ways, rather than this negative stereotype of speculation or hidden risk, just kind of not knowing what you're doing, not making an educated deal. And Buffett designed a payoff profile that fit the moment exactly. He had safety through his preferred shares combined with the leveraged upside through his warrants. I mean, it remains one of the greatest trades, in my opinion, and a perfect example of asymmetric payoff design in the real world. And then finally, I just wanted to say thank you to my professor for allowing us to have complete freedom within this project. It was a very enjoyable class, and I really liked being able to hone in on something that I was interested in. I hope it was informative. I hope you learned something. Have a good